When the HOA decided to build a public bike path straight through my pasture, they assumed it was just empty land. What they forgot, or chose to ignore, was one critical fact: this was active cattle land. What happened next turned their peaceful community project into a full-blown disaster. The problem didn't start with the cattle. It didn't even start with the bike path. It started with a dangerous assumption, one that HOAs make far too often: this land isn't really being used. From the moment the HOA board laid eyes on my pasture, they treated it like forgotten space. Wide open fields, no houses, no fences they thought mattered. To them, it looked like an opportunity. A shortcut. A community improvement. What they didn't see, or chose not to see, was that this land wasn't vacant. It was alive, it was active, and it was legally, undeniably working cattle land. The HOA never contacted me. They never requested access. They never conducted a proper land use or agricultural assessment. Instead, they held closed-door meetings where people with zero farming experience confidently decided what my land was and wasn't used for. Their logic was simple, and completely wrong. This area looks empty most of the time. No one lives there. It's just pasture. To them, pasture meant unused. To me, pasture meant livelihood. Cattle don't behave on a human schedule. They graze, rotate, and move depending on season, weather, and land recovery. Some days the pasture looks quiet. Other days, it's full of 1,000-pound animals doing exactly what nature designed them to do. That nuance didn't matter to the HOA. They saw green space and imagined bike helmets, joggers, and smiling families. So they acted. Without a signed easement, without verified permission, and without even a courtesy call, construction equipment rolled in. Survey flags appeared. Stakes were driven into the soil. Within days, a clear line was cut straight through the heart of my grazing zone. They called it a bike path. I called it trespass. What made it worse wasn't just the path, it was the attitude. When I finally confronted the HOA board, they spoke to me like I was an inconvenience standing in the way of progress. It's just a small trail. The cattle can go around it. This benefits the whole community. That last line is the one they always use. But here's the truth they didn't want to hear: my pasture was never part of their community. It wasn't HOA land. It wasn't shared land. It wasn't negotiable land. It was zoned agricultural, insured as agricultural, managed as agricultural, and most importantly, protected by agricultural land use laws that exist for one reason: because livestock and public access do not mix. The HOA didn't consider safety. They didn't consider liability. They didn't consider animal behavior. They imagined calm cows politely stepping aside for cyclists. That fantasy alone proved they had no idea what they were dealing with. Cattle are not pets. They are prey animals. They react to movement, noise, and unfamiliar shapes. A cyclist speeding past can trigger a stampede. A bell, a shout, or even reflective gear can cause stress responses that put both humans and animals in danger. By cutting a bike path through active grazing land, the HOA created a situation where cyclists could be injured or killed. Cattle could be injured or euthanized. I could be held liable for accidents on land I never authorized for public use. And yet, somehow, they acted surprised when I pushed back. They told me I was overreacting. They accused me of being anti-community. One board member even suggested I move my cattle elsewhere while the bike path was in use. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't ignorance anymore. This was entitlement. The HOA believed their vision outweighed my rights. That their convenience trumped my responsibility as a rancher. That rural land existed solely as a backdrop for suburban comfort. What they failed to understand was that agricultural land carries weight: legal, environmental, and economic weight. Every foot of pasture matters. Every disruption affects grazing cycles, soil health, and animal stress levels. This wasn't just about cows crossing a trail. It was about the HOA inserting themselves into an ecosystem they didn't respect. They also ignored the warnings. I sent written notices. I cited zoning laws. I referenced livestock safety statutes. They brushed it all aside. Nothing has happened yet, they said. That means it's fine. That statement alone showed how dangerously short-sighted their thinking was. Farming isn't about reacting after something goes wrong. It's about preventing disaster before it happens. By the time cyclists started using the path, the HOA was already exposed. Legally, financially, publicly. All because they assumed a pasture was just empty land waiting to be repurposed. They forgot one crucial thing. Cattle don't recognize bike paths. They don't understand HOA plans. They don't follow community guidelines. They follow instinct. And instinct doesn't care about painted lines or wooden signs. The HOA's mistake wasn't building a bike path. Their mistake was believing they had the right to decide what my land was for. That assumption set everything else in motion. And once reality arrived, hoofprints, broken fences, panicked cyclists, it was already too late to pretend this was a harmless community project. This was the moment their control narrative began to crack. And it only got worse from there. Reality doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't send emails. It doesn't wait for HOA meetings to finish. Reality arrived the moment the first cyclist rolled onto that bike path, and came face to face with a pasture that was very much alive. At first, everything looked calm. The HOA proudly posted signs. Community bike trail, fresh gravel, wooden barriers that meant nothing to livestock. Cyclists rode through smiling, convinced they were enjoying a peaceful slice of countryside that had been opened up for them. That illusion lasted exactly as long as the cattle tolerated it. Cattle are observant animals. They notice changes immediately. A new smell, a new sound, a sudden line cut through their grazing route. From the moment the path appeared, the herd's behavior changed. They hesitated where they never had before. They clustered near fence lines. They stopped grazing normally. Stress doesn't always look dramatic at first. It builds quietly. Then came the movement. Cyclists didn't ride slowly. They never do. Bright helmets, reflective gear, spinning wheels, sudden bursts of speed, all of it triggered alarm responses. A bell rang. A voice shouted, "On your left." And just like that, instinct took over. 1,000-pound animal stepped forward. One cyclist swerved. Another slammed on their brakes. Someone screamed. And suddenly, the HOA's peaceful bike path turned into chaos. No one was seriously hurt that day, but it was close enough to scare everyone involved. Within hours, my phone started ringing. Emails followed. Messages piled up. Complaints flooded the HOA inbox. This is dangerous. There are cows everywhere. Someone is going to get killed. That was the moment reality hit them, not as a concept, but as fear. The HOA board scrambled. Emergency meetings were called. Lawyers were contacted. Insurance providers started asking questions the HOA didn't want to answer. The biggest question of all. Why is there a public trail on active agricultural land? Suddenly, the tone changed. The same board members who dismissed my warnings now wanted cooperation. The same people who told me I was overreacting were now asking if I could temporarily remove the cattle, or adjust grazing schedules. That request alone proved how little they understood ranching. You don't pause cattle. You don't put livestock on standby. You don't override biology for suburban convenience. By this point, the cattle were already conditioned to see the path as a threat. Their stress levels were elevated. Their movement patterns disrupted. Even if cyclists avoided the area, the damage was already done. And the problems kept coming. A fence post was knocked loose when a startled cow pushed against it. Another cyclist fell after trying to avoid a herd crossing the trail. Photos surfaced online, cows standing directly on the path, blocking it completely. The comments were brutal. Who approved this? This is insane. Why would anyone put a bike path here? That public pressure forced the HOA into defensive mode. They tried placing warning signs. Caution. Livestock area. As if a laminated sign could override instinct. It didn't work. Cattle don't read. Cyclists don't always slow down. And fear doesn't follow rules. The legal consequences started stacking up quickly. Once insurers got involved, the questions became sharper. Was there written permission from the landowner? Was there a livestock risk assessment? Was the trail compliant with agricultural zoning laws? The answers were uncomfortable. No, and absolutely not. The HOA realized they weren't just dealing with angry emails anymore, they were facing massive liability exposure. One serious injury could bankrupt the association. One animal death could trigger legal action and regulatory scrutiny. And worst of all, they couldn't claim ignorance anymore. They had been warned. By me. By law. By common sense. That's when reality delivered its final blow. During a routine grazing rotation, the herd moved exactly as they were trained to do, across the pasture, straight through the path. A cyclist ignored the warning signs and tried to ride through anyway. The result was predictable. Panic. Shouting. A near stampede. Emergency services were called. Not because someone was injured, but because people were terrified. Deputies arrived, took one look at the scene, and asked a question that sealed the HOA's fate. Why is this trail here? There was no good answer. From that moment on, the narrative flipped completely. This wasn't about a stubborn rancher anymore. This was about reckless planning, negligence, and overreach. The HOA's authority collapsed under the weight of reality. Construction was halted. The trail was closed. Lawyers took over. The same board members who once strutted with confidence now avoided eye contact. Meetings were cancelled. Emails went unanswered. The project that was supposed to unite the community became a symbol of embarrassment. And the cattle, they went back to doing what they had always done. Grazing, moving, existing as they were meant to. The land didn't change. The animals didn't change. Only the HOA did. Reality forced them to accept a truth they should have known from the beginning. Working land is not recreational space. Livestock areas are not lifestyle amenities. And rural property is not an HOA playground. By the time everything was said and done, the bike path was removed, the pasture restored, and the HOA left to explain to residents why thousands of dollars had been wasted on a project that never should have existed. Reality didn't just hit hard. It hit permanently.